Still, we will be taking some questions from the audience towards the end, so have a think about anything that you want to ask Simon or Aidan. Now, without further ado, the director Simon Blake and actor Aidan Gillen.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
So, Simon, I wanted to start with you. I know you worked in theatre and then made some short films. I heard an interview with you where you said you had some success in your 20s and then hit a bit of a wall in your 30s. So can you talk about kind of that process and the process of becoming a fully fledged filmmaker and a feature filmmaker with Still?
Well, I was lucky enough to meet kind of an amazing producer who kind of allowed me to make Still. But yeah, the film is to some extent about how men deal with failure, which is not a very good tagline. But that's kind of what it's about. It's about a person who is not where he hopes to be, and then you throw in all the other different elements, and you watch this man kind of fall apart. And it is difficult when you're a creative person if you're not doing what you love doing. It's not a very good place to be.
Did it begin with a script and then was it a traditional filmmaking method where you wrote a script, you sent it to some people, you got some funding, or what was the kind of process around that?
Not at all. It started off as a stage play about 12 or 13 years ago, and then a friend of mine who is a DOP said you should make it into a film, and at first I was quite reluctant because I loved the claustrophobic nature of the stage play. And I thought that if we opened it out into a film, we would lose that. And what's quite strange is actually, hopefully in a very cinematic way, we've returned to that kind of claustrophobic quality. And so I wrote a couple of drafts. The first drafts were far too close to the stage play. And then it started to open out, and we had some interest. But it's not a very easy sell. So I needed a producer like Colette to have the courage to make it, and for somebody like Aidan to support it. And then it had wings and it had legs. And as soon as Colette got involved, she had access to funding. So it became real and became potential. And then the minute Aidan came on board, that gave us credibility. And so, yeah.
I'm guessing if there's any budding filmmakers in the audience, they'll want to know how a first-time feature filmmaker got an actor like Aidan Gillen to appear in their film. So maybe you can both talk about kind of how you first read the script, how you approached Aidan, this sort of idea.
Through the usual channels, I got sent the script through an agent, through my agent. Who does send me on everything, I'm not sure how it works with other actors, but I'm not sure if, every smaller film script gets through to, an actor that it's intended for, but if the actor, imparts this information to the agent that they do want to read everything and are interested in projects that don't necessarily aren't going to make them rich or smaller, what are seen as smaller projects. So they're not really smaller because the work involved in making them is usually greater, and the involvement's usually greater, and the workload is usually more intense, and the rewards can be greater. So the script came with a cover letter, explaining what the situation was. A link to Simon's showreel, which I was quite impressed with. He'd made some short films which were all very visually striking, and some music videos, same thing. And that was it really. I tend to read things quick and give an answer like there and then, so I think it was probably...
it was very quick. Yeah, it was very quick. I mean, we had a conversation when you were in Croatia, and from that moment, if we could make the schedule work, you were in.
Yeah, and obviously the script has to be good, and the script was good, and it had a good, quite meaty role as well, which is always
And I had said to
helps.
Colette that I thought we could get an actor of Aidan's potential, and ability, because any actor who's interested in good parts would like to take on the role of Carver. So I kind of hoped that we would get somebody like Aidan, because the role of Carver would attract an actor like Aidan, I suspected, and thankfully I was right.
I can't remember the conversation. What did we talk about?
Talked about my films, bit about the character, bit about things you liked, things you didn't like.
Yeah, I think we both liked a lot of the same kind of films and
Yes,
music.
yeah,
And
definitely.
That generally helps. Although visually, I think it came out even better than I would have expected. Not that I wouldn't have expected it to look great, but it does have a different, much bigger look than maybe the shorts had. The shorts were very artistically striking and beautifully framed, but it was quite arty and even abstract. But this is quite classical. Maybe the DP, Andy Parsons. That's right, right?
Yeah.
He hadn't done many feature films before, and I think he did a pretty amazing job.
Yeah, he did an amazing job, particularly in terms of the film is like a modern take on noir, and so we really pushed the darkness and a lot of single source lighting, and kind of really pushed it, and how dark we could take it without it becoming ugly, so that it still has a painterly quality, I hope. And I think Andy did an amazing job, and both myself and Aidan, we knew that we were working with somebody who was in tune and in harmony with what we were trying to create.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to introduce a clip, so
okay.
say what you were going to say.
I was just going to say the atmosphere is quite important in this film, and I think the fact that Simon lives near King's Cross and that I had lived in Islington myself, and we both had kids and raised our kids in that environment, was also a touchstone that was important, and that we knew what it was like to. It's an obvious thing to say, but if I didn't have kids and live in North London, I may not have.
No, I think it would have
I may not have gone there, because I just may not have known what I was talking about, but I do. And
in initial conversations that we had prior to shooting, it was obvious that we had very much touchstones. We have very similar music tastes. We have a relationship with North London. We have children. So there were a lot of kind of bases that meant that there was a shorthand that is always really, really helpful when you're making a film, but particularly a film of this kind of budget where time constraints are huge. If you have an instant chemistry and a shorthand, it makes up for a lot of...
So we're going to take a look at a quick clip. In contrast to what Simon was just saying, it's actually one of the lighter, in both senses, moments of the film, but this is where Tom's ex-wife Rachel meets his now girlfriend Christina for the first time. So if you can roll that clip. So that clip might not illustrate it, but still is a very dark film, and it's a very tough film, and it's quite claustrophobic. So I wondered if it was a very serious shoot, or did you have time to have a bit of fun while you were making it and improvise and have a joke, or was it all very kind of work all the time?
It wasn't that much fun.
Yeah, it was work all the time.
It was work all the time because the schedule was quite tight. It was maybe 3 to 4 weeks, I'm not really sure, and a lot to do in that time.
Particularly once we got outside the flat, then it got really tough.
It's always fun, even if you're not actively trying to make jokes all the time and be funny, If there's a bunch of people around who are into what they're doing, and that makes it fun, but it's work more than anything. There was some, you just asked about improvise. There's not much improvisation in it. There's some, though. I think we used to use it just to get to top and tail scenes, just to kind of get things rolling and do the scene, and then just throw a bit on the end in case something happened, or just to give an exit cut, But it wasn't. It was pretty much tightly scripted, I reckon.
Yeah, although there is an argument the best line in the film is the one that I didn't write.
I don't like that line, so...
He doesn't like it, but everybody else does.
That's what the argument is. We can have that later.
Yeah, we can have that.
Aidan, you obviously tend to balance small films like Still and work with Jamie Thraves with bigger work like Game of Thrones or The Dark Knight Rises. So I wondered if you could talk about the differences between them for you as an actor, and I mean, do you get more chance to explore a character with something like this, or is it all happening too fast and the work is too fast?
The difference is the acting itself is not really any different. You know, the process is the same. I suppose you're going to tend to, the roles you take in the smaller films, of course you're going to take a decent part. You're not going to take a tiny part in a well, you might, but I just don't. I've actively tried to, you know, for every bigger project I've been working on, so say for every season of Game of Thrones, which is what I'm working on at the moment, for every one, you know, do maybe 2 projects like this. So the roles are good, the experience is good, you worked really hard, and you're also participating in the film industry. You know, you're being an active participant in filmmaking at that level, and you know, your presence helps the film happen, and that's, you know, I think it's important to do that. And it's also exciting to be in someone's first film, you know, in a way that it may not be if it's someone's 5th or if it's a 5th season of a TV series, you know, because they're staking everything on it, and they may have spent, you know, 5, 10 years or 15 years getting to that point. So it's an exciting thing to be part of, whether it works or not, you know.
And Simon, I mean, how was it for you having someone with such a track record and someone who has such experience being there for your first film? I mean, I'm you know.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's about the credibility. It makes you feel that you're onto something. You know, I mean, I loved Aidan's work. I love The Wire. I love Queer as Folk. You know, I'd seen the Jamie Thraves films as well, and you know, he's the kind of person that I want to work with, and he's involved in the kind of projects that I would like to make. So it gives you a credibility, and it makes you think that, you know, once Aidan agreed to do it, the whole kind of sense from the team that was working on the film kind of, because you think, we're onto something, because it's very fragile when you're creating something. You know, you really don't know what people are going to think, and so to have Aidan come on board was.
And we should point out that there are a number of other really good actors, or that there are a number of really good actors. I'm not including myself in that terminology, but Jonathan Slinger, who you know, most people don't know. He's a really well-known stage actor, in fact, and had done lots of parts in TV and film, but you know, wouldn't be a household name. And he came on board and played this character Ed, who's the best friend. It's as big a part as my part, and you know, he's really good. As is Amanda Mealing, who was in that clip. Who was the older woman, the ex.
And she's a revelation, because she's largely a TV actress, which, you know, not in any way to put down TV acting, but you know, we had a running joke that every European auteur would be interested in her after Still, you know, because, you know, like Binoche or Kirsten Scott Thomas, her performance feels as strong as that.
There's also a really good young guy, kid. You just saw him in that clip, kind of peering around the pillar, called Sonny Green, who's, you know, I don't know what age he is, 17, 18?
Yeah, he's about 18, 19 now, so he's 16, 17.
But his background is that he's a spoken word artist or a rapper, or it's his first acting role, though,
yeah,
right?
He'd never done anything before.
Where'd you find him?
Because I really wanted a kid that looked like he'd walked off the Barnsbury estate in North London and walked onto the set and bumped into Aidan, literally like the thing that starts the film. And we auditioned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids, and they were all very good in their own way, but you could see the joins because they were all actors. So you could see them thinking about what they were doing rather than responding to what was happening to them. And he came in and auditioned for us. Carmel Cochran, our casting director, found him. And he was just very charismatic, and he'd had a bit of a life, and I felt like he knew the character. And he was really, really good. As Aidan says, you know, they're quite dynamic. The scenes with him and Aidan are really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I won't spoil it for anyone, but the climactic scene between Aidan and Sonny is really remarkable. His performance is really stunning. This is probably as good a point as any to introduce the second clip, which is involves Jonathan Slinger, who you were just talking about, and it's Aidan's character Tom and Jonathan's character Ed looking at slides. So if we can roll that.
I see.
So I'll just ask a couple more questions and then we'll open it to the audience. So have a think about what you want to ask. Simon, when you got to the editing room, did you feel like you'd got the film that you wanted? When you sat down and reviewed the rushes, did it resemble the film that you'd imagined in your head before you made it?
No, initially I was very excited, and then it became problematic. I thought I'd got everything that I needed. But trying to shape the story then became much more difficult. I mean, Aidan has already hinted at the fact that John Slinger's role, Ed, was quite a large role in the screenplay, and so trying to make sure that it was Carver's story, because they both kind of have parallel stories as well that run alongside each other, and opening it out as well. We realised that we had to really kind of hone in on Carver's story. That was the key, and so the editorial process was quite tricky, because we moved away from the screenplay and started moving things further forward in the plot, and so that was probably the toughest process, was the editing. Yeah.
And how do you feel about the way the film's been received? I know you won an award in Ireland, so congratulations for that.
Thank you.
I mean, how are you feeling about the way the film's?
I mean, I love it. I'm very proud of it. It's a very personal film, so it's difficult for me to be too objective. I mean, it's very polarizing. I think you either love it or hate it. It's kind of, I think you either buy into the world or you don't. And if you don't, then it's a fairly tough 90 minutes. If you do, then I think, and also I think it's tricky because it's an attempt to understand a person that is falling apart. And so it's got a heightened sense, because when you're in that state, things are much more heightened and strange and odd. And I think if you buy into that and you understand that, then I hope it's a great ride. But if you don't, and I think that's why it's polarizing. So it's kind of.
So I'll open it up to questions from the audience, if anyone has anything to ask. Go ahead.
I actually had another election question for you, Aidan, but a transatlantic one. I don't know if you've heard that Martin O'Malley, your character in The Wire, was inspired by the rumours he's going to run as a rival to Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination, and I wondered what you thought about that and whether you saw your character, if The Wire had continued, as possibly in your imagination sort of going on to that path.
The character of Thomas Carcetti in The Wire is based on maybe 2 or 3 people, and then there's another. That's maybe 60% of it, and then 40% of it is made up. It's very loosely based on a number of people, one of whom is O'Malley, but it's not O'Malley. O'Malley was always seen as a potential presidential candidate, not just a vice presidential candidate. And he was mayor of Baltimore while we were shooting The Wire in Baltimore. He became governor, and not long after that. So it's not a surprise. And it wouldn't be a surprise if he ran presidentially at any point. So it's not a surprise. Do I think Tommy would have? Yeah, I do. Yeah. I don't know. You tried hard. Yeah. I don't want to use up all the time on a Wire question, but even in the Carcetti journey from season 3 to the end of season 5, it was things were already turning sour, and he was compromised. Thank you.
Any more? Gentleman in the middle here. You can just wait for the mic to be passed along. Gentleman here. And then we'll come back to you after.
This is a question for both of you. I'm an actor about to graduate from drama school in a few months, and it's a very intimidating prospect to sort of go into that world and sort of enter the party, so to speak, without any real idea of how to interact with the millions of guests. I just wanted to ask you both, do you have any advice as how you sort of, in your early days, how you sort of navigated the industry to the successful points that you both are now?
Well, I didn't navigate the industry very well, so I'm the worst person to answer that question.
You said thousands of something. What did you say? Thousands of guests? What did you say?
Just that obviously there's so many different people in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm only one actor. You know, how did?
Yeah, I know. Look, just so is everybody else, though. You know, I think it's finding a good role, being in the right place, playing the right thing, and doing it well, and then trying to get people to see it or to know about it. You know, that's the thing. You can. It's the same with a lot of. You know, I've been involved. I've been an actor since I was 17, and that's 30 years. You know, and there's been plenty of things along the way that I've worked on that I thought, you know, that we all worked really hard on, and that people never saw. You know, so. While it's enjoyable to do this stuff, you want people to see it. But just getting back to the start of things, I mean, in my case, I mean, I was that age, but a certain amount of hustling, you know what I mean, without being crazy and without really annoying people, you know, but actually going out. People do appreciate when somebody walks across town or cycles across town or whatever across town and, you know, delivers a resume or a photograph or whatever it is.
And also being passionate as well.
Yeah,
and
being passionate
yeah,
and trying to learn all the time
and never giving up. I mean, I could have easily given up on Still. Still has been, you know, in my kind of DNA for the last. I mean, the stage play was in 1999, so 16 years. And in that process, in that period of time, I could have given up on many, 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 many occasions, and I didn't, and then I got lucky, and so, you know, I think persistence is another key thing.
And I think making your own work if you have to as well, which a lot more people are doing nowadays. You may not be able to live off it, but if it's good, you'll be able to.
It's a good calling card.
It is a good calling card. Yeah. And people respond to it and appreciate it if it's good.
And you can do that cheaply now with, you know, digital, and, you know, it's not like the old days where, you know, a 16mm film would cost 10 grand, you know, a 10-minute 16mm film, and, you know, now, you know, you can make it for very little and it have high-end production values and everything else. So, yeah. And
being around good people is important. You know, it might be playing a tiny part in something, but if you're around people who are good, you learn a lot, and they like having you around as well. You know, I started out with pretty tiny parts, 1-2 lines, you know, and built up from there over a long time. I don't know. That's all I can say. That's the only advice I have. I didn't go to drama school or any of that, so I was approaching it in the only way that I knew, or that I didn't know, in fact, which was just finding my way. Thanks.
If you can pass the mic back to the gentleman behind you, that would be great.
Sorry, can I ask, do you think the film will, do you fear the film won't get to its audience?
I think the film will get to an audience because it has distribution, you know, so it will get to an audience.
Is it the audience that you...
It's the audience. I mean, it's going to get to the audience, the kind of audience who would appreciate the film. And nowadays, it feels like there's probably as many, I don't know if there are as many independent cinemas as there used to be, but there's certainly some, in London anyway, there's, you know, some pretty decent, like the chains and stuff that, you know, will show this film around town. I think it's probably been made easier due to the digital projection. You know, you can actually have more copies of a film and not just, you know, say when we brought out Jamie Traves' film Lowdown, there was like 2 prints or something. You know, there'd be 2 prints because that's all you could afford to actually have because it's an actual film print. So you can, if there's an appetite for it, you know, and if it's been well regarded or well reviewed or whatever, you can get more screenings. and it's just if it's good, people should respond to it, and if it's not, they'll respond to it in the corresponding way. We know it's not going up against Transformers 4 or whatever. I mean, it might be coming out the same week, but they're in different brackets, and there's always an audience of people who don't want to go and see Fast and Furious or John Wick, you know. So I hope people do see it, but you know,
It's also interesting.
certainly that is a question: who's distributing and what's the deal there? Well, I mean, I know, but I'm just asking you. So.
But it's distributed by Verve in the UK and Ireland, and you know, again, that's a credibility thing for Still. You know, they've distributed some really interesting films in the last 5 or 6 years. So again, to be associated with those kind of films for Still is great. I mean, an interesting sideline is about genre and how to pitch Still, because that's a slight problem. Because for me, I'm interested in making films that kind of fall through the cracks of genre. I'm not very interested in genre per se. And so Still starts off as a very different film and then mutates into something else. And so for poor old Colin at Verve and Colette, they have to try and sell that. And that is tricky because Still is all kinds of films. It's a kind of, you know, it's being sold as a thriller, whether it's a thriller, I don't, you know, it's kind of, it's lots, it's, hopefully it kind of falls through the cracks of genre, and that's, there was always the intention, you know, to make something different that's not like everything else.
But not through the cracks, just through the cracks of the genre cracks.
Yeah, not.
Yeah, speaking of
Not the audience cracks.
Yes.
Speaking of quite independent London cinemas, there is the Regent Street Cinema is opening tonight, and Still will be screening there on Friday for the premiere. So if you want to go, I
It's also screening
don't know
at
if
the
those tickets are still
Tricycle
available,
in
but try.
Kilburn, yeah, screening at the Tricycle in Kilburn on Saturday,
Well, there you
Clapham
go.
Picture House on Sunday. So if you fancy it, and we're doing Q&As there and everything else. So
We've got time
Yeah.
for 2 more questions. So there's a lady there and the gentleman sitting in front of her. So that lady first.
Hi Simon, this one's for you. Just wanted to know, why did you name your piece Still? Why that word?
lots of reasons. He's a still photographer. I still am a big fan of Joy Division, and they had an album called Still, which I loved. It had this beautiful cover, kind of really thick, like Factory Records, kind of, you know, the way they used to produce things was very beautiful. And also, probably more than anything else, the film is about a man receiving a phone call where somebody says, I have some dreadful news, Mr. Carver. Unfortunately, your son passed away today. And Carver, when we join the film, he is still, at that moment, a year on, he's still stuck, frozen, still. And that's why it was called Still. And but that's the key thing, is that he is a person frozen with grief. And that inertia leads to lots of other dreadful things, but that's the key element, is that he just can't move on, he's stuck. And so that's why it's called Still.
Good answer. So final question.
Hi there. I do have a question for Aidan and also Simon, if that's all right. So I'll start with Aidan, which is, it's very admirable that you like your British independent cinema. What makes you passionate about it over Hollywood mainstream, which is something you enter as well with The Maze Runner Part 2?
Well, I'm interested in it all, really, you know. Primarily, it's playing a good role and being around, you know, interesting, creative people. And, you know, I probably, in my cinema going, I do go and see more indie films than I do go and see blockbusters, but I do go and see both, and there's a place for all of it, you know. It's just more exciting to be on the team of the, you know, the team, the underdog, you know. I'd always side with the underdog, and it's more exciting to play on the team that's, you know, it's going to have the harder job in winning the game, you know. It's not all that it's, I don't know. I think that's the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And for Simon, having already seen the film and reviewed it, it's a great film.
Thank you.
I've noticed your kind of influence from Scorsese, because this is a British urban drama or British urban thriller. I've noticed the musical score, very much taken from Bernard Herrmann's Taxi Driver in a way. I felt that there was an influence there. What was your decision to take that kind of a score compared to what someone like Noel Clarke would take with his grime and his R&B with a film like that, which would be more conventional?
He's a lot younger than me, for starters. We didn't want, again, in trying to do something different, we didn't want to do an urban film that had the kind of tics of what normal urban films have. So we went very much for a noir kind of influence that went back to the 50s. And so we also decided with Alex Gray, who did the soundtrack, to tap into all those kind of jazz soundtracks that Duke Ellington did, like Anatomy of a Murder, and Miles Davis, Lift to the Scaffold, and the Gil Evans soundtracks, which then kind of ran into Bernard Herrmann's Taxi Driver soundtrack. And then to also give it a kind of modern update by kind of trying a kind of mix between like Burial and a mix of Burial and the Bernard Herrmann and the Scorsese thing. I'm actually not a massive Scorsese fan. I love Taxi Driver and I love one or two others, but I'm not a massive Scorsese fan. But definitely the idea of somebody raging against the light, and Travis Bickle and Carver, that felt like a very similar. And then there were weird things like he has a jacket that is not dissimilar to, the green. So there were lots of taps in, and the last shot of the film is again very similar to Taxi Driver in terms of kind of a quiet moment at the end of all this carnage, where you can just take stock of what's gone before. So yeah, there were definitely influences.
So we're going to end it there. It's a good place to end it, talking about the end of the film. Go and see Still. Thank you very much for coming.
We need all our champions, so
yes,
please go and see it.
Go and see it.
Thank you.
Thank you.